Thank you. Hello, everyone. Yes, I'm mainly going to talk about our adoption system. I don't think there's a lot of authorities adopt SuDS as yet, and I believe we may be being one of the first following the Flood and Water Management Act. A little bit of history though, or geography, if that is who we are. We're firmly based in the northeast of England. Unitary Authority, since 2009, we were formerly a two-tier county with 7 districts and 1 county council, but we merged under local government review in 2009. Roughly just over 220,000 households, 800 square miles, quite a large area we cover. We have a coastline, but we also have a boundary right in the middle of the Pennines with Cumbria, very rural areas up there. Once the new authority was formed in 2009, the Flood and Water Management Act came along very soon after that and created some new duties for authorities that I'm sure most of you know about, and it was decided at the time to create a new team to look after these duties. So the Drainage and Coastal Protection team, which I work in, was created in 2011. 8 full-time officers. We cover the duties of the Lead Local Flood Authority. We also carry out drainage design. We have a capital programme for flood mitigation schemes, and we also look after the coast for the authority. Now, we set about initially creating what we believed was going to be the SAB according to the Flood and Water Management Act. So we spent our first few years getting ready for the SAB, for the duty. And then we waited, and noticed the SAB didn't come along, and about 3 years went by. They were a busy 3 years because we had some of the worst flooding in a generation in County Durham in 2012 and 2013. Kept the new team very busy with flood investigations, but that started to dry up about 2014, excuse the pun, and we started to look at adoption before the enactment of Schedule 3. It was, we were all ready to start adoption. We were expecting Schedule 3 to be enacted at any time, so we started looking towards that. December 2014, ministerial statement pretty much ruled out the SAB, so that wasn't coming. But we soldiered on anyway, and we agreed our first SuDS adoption in January 2015. We agreed, and I'll rewind slightly. When we first started looking at SuDS adoption, we weren't exactly sure how the SAB was going to go forward with funding. There were some rumours and bits of information. So we came up with some initial thoughts as to how we were going to carry out SuDS adoption, and these are the initial thoughts anyway. First one was by mutual agreement. There wasn't any legislation available to us at the time to insist on SuDS adoption. So it had to be by mutual agreement. We were going to offer the adoption service. A developer could then choose to use us if they wished. We needed a guaranteed income to cover the maintenance. There was no way we could create a budget for this within the authority, set anything to one side. We needed to find a way to fund the maintenance of SuDS if we were to adopt them. We looked at commuted sums, which authorities are very well versed in. We do that all the time, commuted sums for open spaces. But without us having a long-term kind of commitment to SuDS, we weren't sure they were going to keep coming in. A 20-year commuted sum worked out quite expensive, 6 figures almost. Not particularly encouraging for developers if we were going to ask for a 6-figure sum up front before we adopt a SuD. So we decided to go down the route of more of a management fee on the property owners of the new estate, much similar to the way management companies fund open spaces on private estates, communal areas, that sort of thing. So we were going to charge the owners of the properties for the maintenance of the SuD. Third thing, land must be transferred. We wanted to own the SuDS. We certainly didn't want to adopt anything that we didn't own. We felt there was too much of a conflict there, and they're pretty much in line with other adoptions for open spaces. We tend to own the land we're responsible for, being a local authority, so the land must be transferred. Adoption agreement in place prior to the sale of the plots. Now this Because of the way we wish to fund the SuDS with a charge on the land for the SuDS maintenance, the way that works is it's an agreement between the authority and the landowner initially. We only want to deal with one landowner when we do this agreement, not an ever-changing number of landowners as plots are being sold off. That would really complicate things for the way the charge, which is known as a rent charge, actually works. So it was quite important for us to have the adoption agreement in place before any plots are sold. So there's a definite timeline there for adoption for the agreement. Accessible and low maintenance. These were going to be local authority owned areas, these SuDS. We were also going to be charging residents for their maintenance, so we wanted them to be cheap to maintain. We certainly didn't want to be charging people for something that was over and above what was really needed, so quite simple features we would agree to adopt. Accessible, we wanted them to be enjoyed by the people that are paying to fund them, so part of the estate, amenity areas. Fair and accountable. Now this was a more difficult one to come up with. There's a wide variety of housing sizes on our new sites, and we have a 10% affordable housing policy on new development. And our politicians and senior management were very keen that we would charge a different amount, or it would be appropriate to the size of the property what we charged. So a large 4 or 5 bedroomed home or a small affordable home wouldn't have to pay the same amount. It wouldn't be a straight split across the site. Quite a difficult one to come up with, but we come up with a formula that based the maintenance charge on the square area of the plot. So generally the larger houses have larger plots, so it's quite a simple one to work out there. I'll go into a little more detail a little bit later on actually how we calculate that to show how it's what we believe is a fair system. And on the desirable side, the adoption of the open spaces. This is more for cost saving again, if we can cut down the cost of SuDS maintenance. If we're adopting the open spaces, we're cutting the grass, we've got people in that estate working. It saves us money to do everything at the same time. A lot of SuDS maintenance is what we call green maintenance. It's grass cutting, shrub clearance, that sort of thing, litter picking. So yeah, quite desirable for us to adopt the open spaces as well, but not essential. We came up with 5 documents, our legal team mainly did. I had little to do with it, but our legal team came up with these 5 documents for a SuDS adoption. This is the paperwork behind the adoption and the individual agreements in place. So we have the SuDS adoption agreement. This main document sets out the responsibilities of both parties, or all parties involved in the adoption, who such things as the build out, who's going to build it, who's going to maintain the SuD, various key milestones for when certificates are issued for completion, maintenance periods, start and finish. It also links the other documents in the SuDS agreement, are all referenced in there to tie them together. Second one is the rent charge. Rent charge agreement is placed on a land, and it agrees that the landowner pays a rent. Basically, it's as simple as that. We chose the rent charge as it's quite old way of doing things. It's been tested through the courts. It's very robust, and it's very clear and very kind of upfront for anyone purchasing land. And also the beauty of a rent charge is once it's on that land, it passes on to subsequent landowners after that. So once the rent charge is in place before any plots are sold, it's automatic that it then moves on as the plots are sold. The deed of apportionment, this states how that rent charge will be split up and apportioned should areas of land be sold. So our formula for calculating the individual cost of plots is in the deed of apportionment. It's a written formula in kind of a legal jargon, I'd call it that. But basically, it takes the full area of all the plots. You have the maintenance cost of the SuD, which is calculated. Divide the cost of the SuD by the area, and you get an annual square metre cost. That's then multiplied by the area of the individual plot, and you get an annual cost for an individual plot, individual property. They all add up to the full fee, and we get our annual cost in for maintaining the SuD. SuDS transfer, that's simply the transfer of the land. It's a separate document for the title for the SuD. Deed of covenant, this wasn't essential. Our legal team advised that we should have this as a backup and putting a covenant on the land, which basically states that the owner of this land is required to pay a fee to the local authority for SuDS maintenance. So it's kind of a backup. We wanted everything to be upfront. Anyone purchasing one of these properties or later on when they're bought and sold, the covenant and the rent charge should be spotted by the buyer's solicitor very early on. So there would be no surprises. People wouldn't buy a house without realising they had a fee to pay for SuDS maintenance. Quick little layout of our process there. Now there's three main, we see there's three main activities. There's the technical approval of the SuDS. We also have the legal agreement which runs alongside. And this can run before or after or during the planning process. They all need to come together at the legal agreement signed stage, but the important thing is the legal agreement is signed before the properties begin to be sold. That's the key milestone. We can do this process very early on, long before anything's done, or we can rush it through before we want to sell a property, but it must be done and completed by the sale of properties. Yeah. So pre-inquiry is really important. If somebody wants to, if a developer wants to offer for adoption a SuDS to us, to Durham, they need to be happy that this process fits for them. We need to be happy that they're designing something that we're willing to adopt and maintain. So the pre-inquiry is really important. We decide then whether we're going to go forward with this SuDS adoption. It's also the point where we actually get paid or take any money in is the legal agreement stage. So there's quite a lot of work involved before then. We don't really want to go through all of that if the suddenly doesn't go through, falls through. Yeah. So pre-inquiry is probably the most important one on there really, so everyone knows exactly what they're doing. SuDS design's agreed, and once we've got a SuDS design, then a maintenance plan can be generated. And from that maintenance plan, we can generate a maintenance cost, an annual maintenance cost, which then feeds into the legal agreement, and it can then be signed and agreed. After that, it's simply the build out, there's inspections and a maintenance period, various certificates issued, all fairly standard kind of civil stuff. And then finally adoption. We tend to go for a 2-year maintenance period on our SuDS, so they've had 2 full growing seasons to become established. And then we know we're happy with them reasonably. They may have been tested in that time as well, not always, but there's good chance of a 1-in-1-year storm, which is a decent test. And we can be happy to then take it on and adopt. Wrong button. Quick example site. I haven't filled this up with examples. I just really want to concentrate on the way we do our funding and our adoption. But this site's in a little village called Dipton in the north of County Durham. Quite a dense site, infill site we call it. It's right in the middle of the village, quite steep. There is some source control in there, which is on private driveways. We're not adopting those. There's a swale, dry basin, attenuation basin, links to a water course which we own, just off the plan to the right there. We're quite happy with this design, and the 56 plots, mix of property types. The larger plots are probably 3 times the size of the smaller ones, so it's quite a mix of property types. Typical maintenance schedule there, which will be virtually impossible to read for most of you, but generally there on the left-hand side we've got what we call the clean and green kind of maintenance. We've got some litter picking, annual visits, grass cutting, shrub clearance. There's also a desilting every 10 years built into that maintenance plan. At the end of it, we want an annual cost of maintenance because that ties in with the rent charge. The rent charge is an annual charge for maintenance, so everything must be broken down to a 12-monthly cycle. So the 10-year desilting is divided by 10 to add into the annual maintenance. Yeah, there's a 40-year complete regrade back to design levels built in, just to take it back to the original level, so we can be sure that we've still got the storage we're supposed to have. It's still going to work. That's built in. Obviously, that's a 40-year cycle divided by 40 to add in. We've then got some inspections. We do a monthly inspection initially on the flow control. some back office time, and a small admin charge for the processing of the invoice and the receipting in there. So for that scheme, it comes out, the maintenance cost annually is just over £3,000, £3,011.91 is what we look to bring in to cover the maintenance of that forevermore, right through to the end of the development, for the life of the development, if you were. Typical apportionment schedule now. The way we split up that maintenance cost between the plots, we ask the developer to populate a plot area schedule. So the first line is the plot number, just cut down at the bottom corner here for the more interesting bit. So we've got the plot number. He's got his own house type numbers in there, which we're not really concerned. Then we've got the plot area in the third column. At the bottom of that, we've got 14,000 square metres. That's the sum of all 56 plots. Divide the rent charge by that number, and we get just over 21 pence per square metre per year for the plots. Yeah, that then goes back into the formula, and we get an annual rent charge on the right-hand side there for each property. And if you can read those at all, we've got plot 46. That'll be one of the affordable homes, about £24 a year, just over maintenance fee they'll be paying. And then we've got plot 44, roughly 3 times the size, £67 a year. So these aren't huge sums, they're annual sums to cover the SuDS maintenance. It would be an annual bill, annual invoice and receipt. Really no need to do it any other way for this kind of sum. We've created some guidance. We've got a web page, and we also wrote our SuDS adoption guide, which is on the website. The web address is awful, you can see along the bottom there. But if anyone goes to durham.gov.uk and simply searches for sustainable, it comes up top of the list. I wouldn't worry about writing that full address out. And our sample legal documents are on there as well. The documents mentioned earlier on, we've got samples on there. This is all about just giving the developers all the information they need to decide whether they want to come to us. The adoption guide as well, it's not just about adoption. We've also laid out the kind of detail we would like to see for planning applications, for pre-inquiries, outline and detailed plan applications. It's another tool to point developers at when they ask us what we want. We get that all the time. They ring up, what exactly do you want? We've got an estate of design in County Durham, yeah. And yeah, so I think I'm probably a little bit early, but that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you to Brian. Again, any quick questions of clarification specifically for Brian? Brian, we're right at the front.
Brian Wayne, Kent County Council. When do you first raise the question of adoption? Is it something that your planning officers would discuss with the developer coming forward? I ask because do you ever have the case where the development goes forward and then they come to the end and they go, oh, we really want Durham to adopt, and it's sort of retrospective?
Pre-inquiry, really. That's when we tell them we have the service if they don't already know. I would imagine most of the developers in our area now know. There's one in particular that's sending almost all of their schemes to us, which is good. Others a little bit hitty-missy whether they send them our way, but yeah, we're very upfront with it, and pre-inquiries is the time really to mention it when anyone calls. It's always, yeah, we offer the service. I wouldn't say we actively promote it, but the service is there if anyone wants to take us up on that. Yeah.
Another quick question from George.
Hello, George Warren from the GLA. Brian, fantastic. It's really great that you've taken this step in through the adoption regime. I'm sure there's a lot of local authorities in the room that are thinking of going down this route. I have a slight concern about outsourcing of the maintenance in terms of there's a lot of councils who don't have that abilities in-house. Do you see that as a potential barrier? Can that be overcome on the basis of lifetime costs and contracts changing over that development lifetime?
Yes, I would say it is a potential problem. At Durham, we have a very large grounds maintenance team. So it's very easy for us to take on the maintenance of SuDS. Other authorities may struggle. Yeah, definitely may struggle. We've written into, the way the rent agreement is written, we can nominate somebody to take over the maintenance on our behalf. We do have that option open in the future. So if there was a time when we didn't have such a big grounds maintenance team, it wouldn't change anything. We would likely just contract out SuDS maintenance, still be overly responsible. We could even contract out the collection of the fee. It could be done like that. We could assign a management company. It's all quite open for us in the future. But at the time, at the moment, it's much better for us just to look after them ourselves because we're all set up for that. And most of the time, we'll probably be cutting the grass right next to them anyway. So
I agree.
Yeah.